at Heritage Baptist Church together, where we attended, and Manning and I worked at Baptist Bible College, or BBC, which is now Clark Summit University, for years together. He was an administrator and also an adjunct faculty member of that university. They were married, they graduated from their education, their college, and went right into the Air Force for 22 years. He wore many hats at that time, and then was released, and then came and worked with us at Baptist Bible College, Clark Summit University. He is presently the director of Chaplaincy of the General Association of Regular Baptist Churches. That has him traveling a great deal and sharing with men and women what it's like to be a chaplain. He is a soul care fellow. They minister to chaplains who are active around the world, and he's here today to share with us his ministry. We're glad for him. Where do you go?
Thank you, brother.
Hopefully I turned my mic on. Yep, I did. Okay, good. Get my clicker. Well, good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure for Jennifer and I to be here with you and have the opportunity to share with you about the Regular Baptist Chaplaincy, a ministry that was telling some folks earlier that I wasn't looking to get into the ministry, but sometimes God takes us to where we're not looking, and we ended up doing this, and we've been doing it for about 4 years now, and it is a joy for us to be able to come and share exactly what the ministry does. So let me see if I can make the clicker work. Am I pointing it? Oh, okay. So anyway, while we're waiting for the technology to catch up, share a little bit about myself and how we got to this position. I'll have the slides catch up to where we're at. Coming into the military was not a hard choice for me. Both my grandfathers served in the Navy in World War II. My father served as a electronic warfare officer on B-52s during Vietnam, was a career officer, so it was something that I knew that I was going to be doing. Ever since I was a little kid, I just loved the idea of uniforms and wearing the blue and being a part of it. So there was no doubt in my mind about going into the Air Force and serving my country. As John had mentioned, Jennifer and I met at Michigan State University. We got married June 11th of 1988, and I was commissioned on June 25th of 1988. So she has been with me the entire ride that we have been in the Air Force. And in 2010, after 21 years, 7 months, and 6 days, not that anybody was counting, we decided it was time to hang up my uniform and to go on and do other things. It was a great joy. It was a privilege to be able to be a part of that. And one of the great things about being a retiree is I still have my little blue ID card and still go on base and buy out the meat department at the commissary and all those things like good retirees do. So we're still very much a part of that and privileged to be a part of it. I started out as a missile launch officer for the Minuteman Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. So I was one of those guys underground with his hand on the proverbial button, but it's actually a key. And did that for 4 years. Got tired of living 80 feet underground and decided to put my college degree in telecommunications and broadcasting to use, and became a public affairs officer, so a press officer, for the vast majority of the rest of my career, where I had the opportunity to participate in a number of deployments. My first one was to Operation Northern Watch, and that was in the spring and summer of 1999, if you recall that time. That was when the world stage told Iraq that you cannot fly north of the 36th parallel or south of the 36th parallel or north of the 32nd parallel, and if you do, bad things will happen. And they did, and often bad things would happen. But a great experience to be in that part of the world, Asia Minor. Turkey is a beautiful country, rich with history, got to go to places that I never thought I would get to see, and see church history in a very real sense. Later on, I had a chance to deploy to Iraq in 2004. I was there in Baghdad in the Green Zone when things were still pretty cooking. But it was a great experience to be there, to go and see firsthand what was going on and to tell the story of war. And that's what we did. I had the privilege of working with the Pan-Arabic press desk. So we had 2 press desks that worked the media during that time. We had the Western press, which would include, American press agencies, Western European press agencies. But I had the Pan-Arabic. And although I don't speak a lick of Arabic, I had an amazing team of local nationals, Iraqi nationals, that we would engage with the press on. And it was a unique experience. The rules of engagement when it comes to religion when you're deployed is you cannot actively proselytize, because that's a violation of the terms of the Status of Foreign Forces Agreement and things that we have with other countries. But if the host nation nationals bring up religion or anything, you are free to talk about it. And so I was there over Christmas of 2004, and like any soldier, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman, when they're away from home, they want something that reminds them of home. So we put up Christmas trees, we played Christmas music, and my Iraqi team was absolutely fascinated by it. And that opened the door to share, my faith as a Christian. 3 of the team were very, very devout Muslims. I became very close with one of them. Ali Muhammad was his name. And he always wanted to talk about the Bible. And he wanted to talk about their view, of course, how they view Ishmael versus how we view Isaac. And had some amazing discussions over baklava. They didn't have a lot of money to bring gifts, but they make the baklava, which is that pistachio pastry, and it's absolutely amazing. And we had a great time talking about different things as it pertains to religion. Unfortunately, 6 months after I left, he was killed by a car bomb. And that just was the nature of that environment. But it was a unique environment, and what was great about it was the engagement that I had with chaplains. I was not a chaplain, I was a line officer when I was in the Air Force. And I remember taking that long drive from Baghdad International Airport. I'd been traveling about 40 hours, each airplane getting successively smaller and clunkier and noisier and hotter until we finally landed at Baghdad. The back of the C-130 pops down. You've got about 40 pounds of what we call battle rattle on, ceramic sappy plates, body armor, things of that nature, your A2 bags. And the back of that airplane pops down. It's about 130 degrees on the tarmac. And, but they said it's a dry heat. Oh, no, that's hot is hot. And so we had the 45-minute ride from Baghdad International Airport over to where we were staying in the palace compound. At the time, Route Irish was the most dangerous road in the world. We called it the Steel Dragon. Our convoy consisted of armored up Humvees and an armored up bus, and we snaked our way through traffic in downtown until we got there. But I was so out of it, not really knowing everything that was going on. Here, let me catch up to some of our pictures. Okay, so there's a picture of my 2 grandfathers and my dad. Again, they serve as an inspiration. It's not coming up. Okay, I'm seeing it there, but it's not coming up there. Okay, well, we'll keep going until technology decides to agree with us. But anyway, getting to Baghdad, getting to the compound, you're tired, and here I am, an Air Force guy with a bunch of guns, and I'm like, what's an Air Force guy doing in Baghdad? How did I get here? But it was really cool in the sense that you go in, and when you first get there, you check in and you get a temporary housing. It's a tent with 250 of your closest friends while they get you a more permanent residence. And after a couple days, I finally got my hooch. And I remember dragging my bag through, and it was just basically trailers, but they were, protected by, protected by sandbags and things to that nature. So let me move on. So there I am as a missile launch officer in the lower left-hand corner. That's a Minuteman III ICBM making its way toward the Kwajalein Atoll from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. There is Baghdad right there. There's my team in that center picture kind of to the left. An amazing group of people. And so you can kind of get an idea what it's looked like. Baghdad is very dusty and it stinks to high heaven. Just a fine silt that gets everywhere. By the time you get out of the shower and make your way to the bed, you're already covered with dust, so you just, why even bother? But so I show up to my hooch, and there is my roommate. He's got a big old cigar in his mouth. He's an Army lieutenant colonel, and I was a major at the time, and I look, and he's reading his Bible. And I'm like, this is going to be just fine. And throughout that whole time, having the engagement with chaplains became critical. They were a sense of normalcy in a time of chaos. And the first Sunday that we had in worship there was an amazing experience. We were in one of the palace rooms, and if you looked up in the ceiling, it was pictures of black stallions and rockets and all this stuff, but yet here we were singing praises to Christ. And it was absolutely a surreal experience, but an amazing experience. And in that first deployment where I really was in harm's way like that, it reminded me of my life verse, which comes out of 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 9. For the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose hearts are completely his. So during the time of my deployment, I was reminded daily that there is of this earth that I could go, that God is not there with me. And no matter what the circumstance, he is there taking care of me, watching over me. And whatever happens, well, that's God's will. But knowing that you're not alone. Pretty amazing experience. A few years later, I had a chance to go back to Iraq. This time I went to Balad Air Base, which is a base north of Baghdad. And it was kind of at the end of things, of the conflict. The war was kind of drawing down, but yet we had a very pivotal role there. It was a field hospital. It was a level 1 trauma hospital. So everybody that came from the field that had been injured would make it through there and then eventually go on their way down to Landstuhl. The amazing statistic was if they've got somebody that was injured on the battlefield, if they were able to make it to Balad, their survival rate was over 99%. And that's a testimony to the men and women that do the medicine in the field and then back stateside and all those things. Incredible statistic. But had a great worship time. That upper left-hand picture there that you see, the great thing about Sundays was that was the one day we didn't have to have all of our gear on. We still had to have our weapons nearby, but it was a day that we could, for a couple hours, just be casual. It was truly casual Sunday. It was shorts and t-shirts, our PT uniform, but an amazing group of individuals that came together under the direction of chaplains and had amazing worship opportunities. So just a great experience. That was my team there in the lower left-hand side. A privilege to serve with these airmen, and a great experience altogether. So this is a picture of Jennifer and I, commissioning day 1988, retirement day 2010. So she had literally been with me, has been with me the entire ride of our military experience. And now as we serve the Lord in this capacity, it just keeps getting better and better. We have 2 sons. Our oldest son, Connor, is a pilot in the Air Force. And he and his wife were just blessed by having a baby 4 weeks ago. So we entered into the realm of grandparenthood. So we're very excited about that and ready to lay some serious spoilage on our grandson. Our other son, Austin, is a Michigan State trooper. And he is engaged to a lovely young lady. And we are just thrilled to have them have both of our daughter-in-law and future daughter-in-law part of our family. So let's talk a little bit about the chaplaincy. There actually is biblical precedent for the chaplaincy when you think about it. If you look at the characters such as Daniel. Here, Daniel is a man that was trained for government service. His duties were not necessarily spiritual. And as the scripture says, he labored among the sorcerers and the magicians. And that's exactly the environment that our chaplains operate in. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. But they're trained for a specific purpose, but they're not in a traditional church setting. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But a testimony to Daniel is his character. And that's why we're very careful about who we have come as chaplains. Daniel was known for his spirituality. If you look in Daniel chapter 4, Looking at verses 8 and 9, it says, "But at last Daniel came before me. His name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God. In him is the spirit of the holy God. And I told the dream before him, saying, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy God is in you, and no secret troubles you, explain to me the visions of my dream that I have seen and its interpretation." Our chaplains are above board in their integrity. They play a pivotal role as guide and counsel to those that they're serving. Their integrity is of utmost importance. Their spirituality can be without compromise. It must be without compromise. And so it's important that as we go through and we have people come seeking to be endorsed as chaplains, that we have a very thorough vetting process to make sure that they are indeed ready, first and foremost, have the qualifications and ready to serve as a chaplain, but also serve in an environment that is not a traditional church setting. Daniel was also known for his integrity and not compromising. If you look in Daniel chapter 6, verses 3 and 4, "Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and the satraps because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. So the governors and the satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel according to concerning the kingdom. But they could find no charge or fault because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found in him." Chaplains must be above reproach, their integrity without question, and doctrinally rooted in who they are and who they are representing. And as an endorsing agent, we have that privilege, the General Association of Regular Baptist Churches, to send those called by God to serve as chaplains in a variety of capacities, and we'll talk about those in just a few minutes. So let's talk about the historical roots of the chaplaincy. The Old Testament often refers to priests accompanying troops into the battle. So it's not a new idea of having clergy with the grunt foot soldier as they go into battle. In Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 2 through 4, it says, "And it shall be when you come nigh into the battle, that the priest shall approach and speak unto the people." If you go on looking further in Joshua chapter 6, in this passage, the 7 priests are carrying the ram's horn as they march around the walls of Jericho daily for the 6 days. Then they're followed by other priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and then finally the troops. And then we all know what happens as the trumpet sounds and the walls come down. So the idea of having godly men with those that are fighting the battle goes back, way back, to true historical biblical history. The modern chaplaincy, if you want to use that, roots are actually more Catholic in origin. And maybe not as far back as the Old Testament time, but still 742 was a long time ago. And that's when the Council of Ratisbon first officially authorized the use of chaplains for armies, but prohibited, quote unquote, the servants of God from bearing arms or fighting. The word chaplain itself also dates back to this period. There's a 4th century legend that held that the pagan Roman soldier called Martin of Tours encountered a beggar shivering in the night, in the cold, and he gave him his cloak. Later, he had a vision of Christ dressed in the cloak, and as a result, Martin was converted to Christianity, and he devoted his life to the church. And after his death was canonized, Martin of Tours later became the patron saint of France, and his cloak, now a holy relic, was carried into battle by the Frankish kings. The cloak was called in Latin the capa. Its portable shrine was called the capella. Its caretaker priest, the capellanus. Eventually, all clergy affiliated with the military were called capellani, or in French, chapelain, hence chaplain. So there's a brief history of where the word chaplain and chaplains got its origin. Now let's jump forward to the American Revolution. George Washington assumed command of the Continental Army at Cambridge, Massachusetts. By the time he got there, there were already chaplains present for duty. Washington could count 15 chaplains serving with 23 regiments gathered around Boston. In 1775, the Continental Congress gave chaplains its official recognition and voted to pay its various officers and enlisted personnel in the Continental Army that weren't previously covered by other provisions. The reference, the resolution's called the Chaplain's 20, and it's reference to what chaplains were paid, $20 a month. The same as the judge advocates, and it was the first official recognitions of chaplains by the American government, and as such considered the of the chaplaincy. Nearly a year later, General George Washington issued the following general order. It reads, New York, July 9th, 1776. The Honorable Continental Congress, having been pleased to allow a chaplain to each regiment with the pay of $33 and 1/3 per month, the colonels or commanding officers of each regiment are directed to procure chaplains accordingly, persons of good character and exemplary lives, to see that all inferior officers and soldiers pay them a suitable respect and attend carefully upon religious exercises. The blessing and protection of heaven are at all times necessary, but especially so in times of public distress and danger. The general hopes and trusts that every officer and man will endeavor so to live and act as becomes a Christian soldier, defending the dearest rights and liberties of his country. Don't let anyone tell you that there are no historical Christian roots in our nation. It was from the very founding that our forefathers understood the necessity, I should say, of having a godly perspective on what was being done, and having godly men embedded with them to guide them and to lead them. So just a bit of trivia. My fellow veterans in here would know this stuff. Chaplains are commissioned as officers. Although they are not line officers, they are non-combatants, they are nonetheless commissioned as officers. They're referred to as chaplains, but yet they carry their rank commensurate with the responsibilities that they have. The reason that enlisted men wear their rank on their sleeves is because they represent the strength and the muscle of the Army, of the military. The officers wear their rank on their shoulders because it represents the weight and responsibility of leadership and command. Our chaplains carry a great weight in leadership, not command, but in leadership. And so they are given commissions as officers so that they can relate to men and women at all grade levels. And so that's why they are commissioned officers. So, as I said, military chaplains goes back a long time. They're non-combatants, but they are there to provide for the free exercise for all military members. They live and work among the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen that they serve, and Marines that they serve. They deploy with them. They have the same operations tempo. They have the same deployment requirements that every other person that deploys goes, except their weapon is not a gun, it is the Bible. And it is their charge to take care of those that they're serving with. A commander is responsible for the religious affairs in his unit. I had the privilege of being a squadron commander at one point in my career, and it is true. You are responsible for the welfare and care of every aspect of those that are under your command. And chaplains play a very important part. Religious affairs are the commander's responsibility. All military commanders are responsible for religious affairs in their command. That is a joint publication. So that means it goes across all services. All services must abide by it and have that understanding. So we have military chaplains, and the GARBC endorses men that are called to be chaplains. They must have minimum amounts of education. They must have minimum amount of years of practical pastoral care. And then they're actually selected, once endorsed by us, it's up to the respective service to select them for service. So the endorsement does not automatically mean that they will go in the military, but without that endorsement, they would not be able to. But we also have institutional chaplains or vocational chaplains. So as military chaplains, they are paid by the government through your tax dollars. They are paid commensurate with the grade and the rank that they hold. That is their full-time job. Likewise with institutional chaplains. These are chaplains that serve in non-military situations. We have chaplains that have served in the Veterans Administration. We have chaplains currently serving in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, other hospitals and hospice programs where that is their full-time responsibility, and other businesses and organizations where chaplains will serve in a vocational capacity. In that capacity, they typically minister one-on-one. They'll hold Bible studies. They'll do counseling, support during crises. They have to kind of be a jack of all trades, ready to listen, ready to care. We also have community service chaplains, and these are chaplains that are typically volunteers. Many of our pastors do become chaplains because it provides another entree, if you will, into the communities that they serve. They will serve with first responders, police departments, and ambulance companies. We have sports chaplains that will be there. One of our chaplains is actually a chaplain for a national horseshoe throwing team. So you just never know. But wherever there's a need, a chaplain is ready there to serve and to minister and to care. Many of the volunteer chaplains are lay chaplains. So they don't necessarily have to be ordained. They come through us, they have the same application process as full-time chaplains, have to pass the same minimum requirements in terms of doctrine and character and things to that nature. But ultimately, they are commissioned by their home church to serve as a chaplain in their community. And that's very common in instances where we have chaplains serving in jails and things to that nature, where we can send out laity and they can go and conduct Bible studies under the auspices of being a chaplain. We do also endorse women in non-ordained capacities, and I'll highlight a couple of them here shortly. So as you know, where a woman can come and she can seek endorsement as a lay chaplain and go and minister in environments where it would only be appropriate for a woman to minister and care for other women. Again, such as jails and prisons and other areas where they would be able to have a much better impact. So the role of the chaplain, 2 core competencies: pastoral care and advised leadership. They provide stability, and in the military setting, they provide for the warfighter a readiness. Same for the first responders. They must be able to operate in a pluralistic environment, meaning that they're going to be surrounded by other chaplains that are not necessarily Christians. There are almost 250 different denominations and religious organizations that the government recognizes. So you're going to be ministering next to a lot of people. You have to be able to do that without compromising your own doctrine. They provide resiliency and spiritual fitness. Why is chaplaincy important? Matthew 7 is a great verse. Having a strong foundation on which you can build upon, in this case, if you're advising leadership or ministering, that you have a strong foundation that you are operating from. So building that house on stone, not on sand. Just some gee whiz facts, and I won't bother to read through all of them, but study after study shows, and this is a secular study, by the way, that shows active faith leads to all the good things on the left and less of the not so good things on the right. And that's where chaplains have a unique entree in ministering in their communities where perhaps a traditional church environment won't work. And chaplains have that opportunity to do so. But often what happens is they build that relationship and then people start coming to church. So it's a great outreach program. So just a quick cover. Chaplaincy versus church ministry. Doing chapel. Chapel can happen anywhere. There's not necessarily a set, like we had when I was in Baghdad, we called it the Canvas Cathedral. There's not necessarily a set building or place that takes place, where chapel takes place, versus a traditional setting. Again, one is not better than the other, just to give you a comparison of the difference between the two. A chaplain is very role-driven. Typically, a chapel staff will be one chaplain and a chaplain assistant. And that chaplain assistant is an enlisted person that is there to provide administrative assistance to the chaplain, as well as provide protection, because chaplains are prohibited from carrying weapons. So the assistant is there to protect the chaplain as well. Churches are very event-driven. Again, this is not a good or bad thing. What we're doing right now is a very good thing. We're together enjoying the fellowship. But we think of church and we think of certain events. Relationships tend to be very short-term, just by nature of how the setting is in the military. People are coming in and out, or if they're with a first responder, they can be riding with different people at any given time. So not a whole lot of depth, where when relationships with your pastor are very deep and long. and you build a real long-term relationship. Chaplains usually have broad access, but not usually, again, that deep because of the time constraints. Whereas within a church environment, it's a little bit narrow, but there's deep access to the community. A chaplain in the military in particular is accountable to a command structure. He works for the commander. He is part of what they call the special staff. There's 3 individuals that work for the commander in a guidance and counsel capacity. One is the lawyer. One is what I did as a public affairs officer to provide guidance and counsel on how to interact with the media. And then thirdly is the chaplain to provide that moral guidance, to make sure things are being thought of, what are the after effects, all those things, plus to provide health care in times of struggle and challenge. As mentioned, chaplains have frequent separations. Active duty ones are away from their families just as much as the regular soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, or Coast Guardsman. Whereas your pastor typically is around on a more consistent basis. So, real quickly, some of our chaplains. This is Chaplain David Hill. He is a chaplain with the Michigan State Police. He is not only one of our chaplains, but he's also a very dear friend. That when our son became a Michigan State Trooper, he was one of the first men that was there to reach out to Austin. Every Thursday was chaplain night, and that was the one time during the week where the recruits could just, I can't say let down their hair because they had no hair, but they could just relax and talk with a chaplain. But he does ride-alongs, ministering to chaplains, conducting funeral services for those that have been killed in the line of duty. This is Chaplain Sid Capellas, and he is a hospice chaplain out in California. And he has a very strong and vibrant ministry carrying this picture. Actually, we asked if we could use it, and he said, by all means. It's a couple years old now, but it represents the ministry. He's praying with a lady who is near her final days, providing comfort to her. Now, this is Chaplain Pam Russell, and she has a great story. Pam started out, she married an Air Force guy in England. She's British by nature, moved back to the States. Her husband died. She got involved with what's called the almond tree ministry, and it was dealing with drug addictions. That evolved into where she started being a chaplain to the Indiana State House. She and a partner in ministry in this public servants prayer ministry. Before Governor Pence became Vice President Pence, Pam was honored with the highest civilian honor that you can be awarded by the Indiana governor. It's called the Sagamore of the Hoosier Award, for her ministry and care, not only for the governor and the governor's staff, but for the entire floor. She worked the legislative floor. They know her. She does Bible studies, still does. And she has since branched out into international, where she and Partnerships for Prayer, or Public Servants Prayer, are out helping foreign governments establish chaplaincy programs in their government programs. So just a great testimony of what's going on there. This is one of our chaplains. I'd like to play this real quick. I don't know, can you hit enter if it can play?
Hi, my name is David Price, and I'm a chaplain here with the 944 Fire Wing here at Loon Air Force Base in Arizona. My role here as a chaplain is providing the worship opportunities for airmen and their families. What that means is Bible studies, outreach events, activities, back to school bash, whatever it might be. So with this also, then my role is advising leadership and making sure that leadership understands the quality of life and some of the ethical decisions and some of the events around the base and even in employed settings. So as part of this, one of the great examples of being a General Association Regular Baptist Church chaplains is actually an airman from one of our churches back in Iowa. Actually has ended up here, and I work with them here. And they're familiar with the churches, and so the connection that they had and people sharing the gospel with them there at the church back in Iowa, they're now here and have had opportunity to do Bible study and everything with that. So the association really plays into all the connections across the country. So thank you for supporting your regular Baptist chaplains.
What's really great about Dave is that he is a reservist, so he's a part-time chaplain. When he's not doing his reserve duty, he and his wife are church planters. And so they've got a great ministry going on. So just neat opportunities for them to go on. There we go. So chaplains provide care in times of need. And you can see some of the statistics in recovery, rehabilitation, and guidance. They provide counsel in times of uncertainty, using a biblical foundation for everything that they do. All of our chaplains, they are Christ-centered, biblically based chaplains. And their doctrine statements must be in agreement with who we are as an association. And that way, that provides them the necessary guidance and direction for what they need when they're doing their chaplaincy. And then lastly, comfort in times of tragedy, providing care in times of loss, responding in national emergencies, wherever the need might be. That's where they're at. Oh, there we go. So you can find out more about the regular Baptist chaplaincy. We have our table set up behind the doors there. If you're interested in becoming a chaplain, you can get the information there. Also, business cards are there, and would love to talk to you about becoming a chaplain. Real quickly, my role as the endorser is not only to serve as the administrative pusher for all these things that are going through, but as John had mentioned, Jennifer and I have the privilege of going and visiting our chaplains in the field and being their chaplain, if you will, and encouraging them. And I'm also there to serve as their advocate. If any of our chaplains are ever put in a position where they are being asked to compromise what they believe, what we believe doctrinally, and some of the social changes and mores that are going on, you can understand what I'm getting at. As the endorser, I have the authority to go right to the very top, to the Chief of Chaplain's office at any time, if I feel like our chaplains are being under undue command influence to do something that is against our beliefs. Our chaplains serve at the leisure of the sending agent, meaning we trump the government in that regards. That the government cannot force our chaplains to do anything that we say, no, you cannot do. And so I'm in a position as an objective player, not putting them in a position where it would compromise them. I can go and do that. We meet once a year annually, where we meet with all the chiefs of chaplains at the Pentagon, where we get the latest updates on what's going on, recruiting trends, and their needs. So there's a great respect between the senior leadership within the Pentagon and the endorsing agents. So with that, I'll end with a quote. George Washington, I consider it an indispensable duty to close this last solemn act of my official life by commending the interests of our dearest country to the protection of Almighty God and those who have superintendence of them into his holy keeping. And that is the regular Baptist chaplaincy. Thank you for giving Jennifer and I the opportunity to be here with you this morning, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.